Tom, I brought this up earlier because, as I said, this kind of went under, I guess, to some degree, under the radar yesterday. The announcement by the U.S., Donald Trump, signing that order, authorizing a thing called the Bridger Pipeline. What do you know about this?
Well, it sounds a lot like the pipeline that kept getting put off. That was going to be the Keystone XL pipeline. So this is going to be a slightly shorter version of it. And frankly, even though we just played on the newscast a clip of Mark Carney saying, well, heavens no, we would never use access to our resources as a bargaining chip or as leverage in our negotiations. The fact of the matter is, if we tie the Americans even closer to us and make them more reliant on our natural resources like petroleum, that's something that works in our favor. So overall, this thing has been contested internally in the U.S. because of a failure to respect the rights of American First Nations, Indigenous people there. On the Canadian side, of course, it was part of a wider concern with regard to the production of greenhouse gases, but a lot of that seems to be less important these days when dealing with the guy with the orange face, and that's where we are right now. We're going to be pushing this thing through from our side. Of course, it's our resource, and we can always turn off the taps anytime we want, but for now, it's very nice to be able to at least make the Americans realize that they don't have everything, and they need other people, starting with us.
Yeah, by the way, worth pointing out again, you remember Donald Trump, right? We don't need Canada's oil and gas. We have more than anybody.
No.
Yes. So much for that.
One of those things about Donald Trump.
Really? That he lies sometimes or makes stuff up? Is that what you're suggesting, Tom?
Or says the opposite from one day
I
to the
see.
next.
All right. I want to get to this other story. First of all, I don't know if you heard Eric Duhem today. He was on with Elias, this idea of flip-flopping on Bill 96, and he's got a brand new book out, of course, which talks about toxic federalism. Do you have a sense, Tom, that he's kind of, gone from one side to the other side? We call it flip-flopping. Is that the sense you have with Eric Duhem?
He's never been on any side. He's never had any ideological coherence. In the last election, he was hither and yon. He was going to he would be in Hampstead and Côte St. Luc talking about Bill 96, and he was going to tear it up. Then he'd go back to Quebec City and become a nationalist. And so this time around, he's basically giving up on Montreal, even though we got him on CJAD 800 with Elias today. He's not going to be spending any money. He's got quite a bit of money because in Quebec, your party gets a per vote slice of cash from the government, and so he's got a fair bit of money heading into this election. But he's got one thing in mind. He's going to try to get a couple of seats in and around Quebec City. He won't, by the way. He won't get any, but that's his only purpose. He's not, and this is what he's been saying to people that I'm close to who have been speaking with him. And he says, no, I made a big mistake last time around. Didn't know where to spend the money that I had, and I was trying it scattershot. This time it's going to be very concentrated in la région de la capitale nationale, the Quebec City region.
So I want to go to something. I actually played a clip from you from, I guess, earlier in the week. It might have been from last week, talking about Christine Frechette and how she has been pretty much doing, everything right for the past week or so. Yeah. Announcing, tax cuts for small and medium-sized businesses, the welcome tax reduction. So the point has been made, she's had a pretty easy run up until now because, of course, the National Assembly has been pro-rogue. Exactly. This could all change starting next week. What do you think?
Oh, it will. There's no question. I mean, the PQ is going to be gunning for her. They're smarting right now. I work, as you know, a ton in French media here in Quebec, and the attacks are just so completely bonkers and over the top. I don't know if you're aware, Aaron, but I'll share it with you. Did you know that there was a vast federal conspiracy underway to help Christine Frechette? Yes, all you have to do is listen to some of the commentators on the French side. And how do they know about that? Well, they just know. They haven't got any evidence, but who needs evidence? You can just affirm it. So the affirmation is she would never have gotten such a high-level meeting in Washington if Ottawa hadn't prepared it for her, which is complete and utter baloney. Quebec has a full-time rep in Washington who worked very hard to get that meeting. They got the meeting, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the feds. But it's an indication of the fear right now, because, of course, they were, already getting, their knife and fork ready to eat a big chunk of celebratory cake as soon as Quebec becomes independent. But that has to, of course, require the PQ getting elected, which seemed like a certainty 8 weeks ago. But I think that Pierre Poilievre is rubbing off on Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. Let's call him Paul Saint-Pierre Poilievre, because he's going through the same thing. Poilievre had a 27% lead over Trudeau. It looked like a sure thing. In comes Mark Carney. Oop-a-lie. All the other parties are pushed to the side. It becomes a two-way race, and Carney wins it. I think we're going to see the same thing here. It's going to be in the last couple of weeks before the election. Maybe it could be the Liberals if they start being smart. They've been smart the last couple of days. I saw Sean Milliard finally going on to an economic file talking about making Quebec pro-business, which it hasn't really been. We've been creating more public service jobs than business jobs. So that's a promising angle for him instead of trying to, again, he's been doing like shooting left, right, and center. There's been no coherent policy coming out of the Liberals, and that's why they're suffering. But they could be the person. But I think right now, if things continue the way they are, it's going to be Christine Frechette and the CAQ who will be seen as by voters. 75% of voters don't want a referendum, Aaron. Guess what? They don't want that. So they're going to make a decision at the last minute which of these parties is the vehicle to stop the PQ. And it's a pure strategic voting thing. The Quebec Conservatives and of Mr. Durham that you just talked about, they're going to get flushed. The Quebec Solidaire, they're going to get NDP. Do you remember what happened to the NDP in the last federal election? They went down to 5%, and now they're down to 5 MPs. That's what's waiting for Quebec Solidaire. It will be a titanic battle between the Parti Québécois and the party that the public decides has the best chance of beating the Parti Québécois for now. That is Christine Frechette and the CAQ.
Let me throw a hypothetical at you, okay? We know the policy Pierre Plamondon is not going to back down on having, a referendum and eventual sovereignty, right? We know
Thank
that.
Goodness.
Okay. What if, though, recognizing what you said, and this is not news to him, right? We know most Quebecers now, that number's as big as it's ever been, do not want a referendum or sovereignty. What if he says, and I think he alluded to this a while ago without making it part of his platform, if he wins this election, right, he will not hold a referendum until the third or fourth year. Does that make a difference at all?
Pas tout. The average Quebecer sees through this baloney, knows that the guy is radically intended to try every trick in the book. Instead of having a government for 3 or 4 years, we would have all of our taxpayers' money, all of our borrowing capacity, everything put to one purpose, breaking up Canada and separating Quebec from the rest of Canada. Quebecers are not going to fall for this one. It's like Lucy, and promising Charlie Brown won't pull away the football. It's just not. It's been one time too many. Nobody's going to be conned by Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon into believing he might wait. And by the way, what is the advantage of waiting? It's just years of insecurity and chaos. You don't think we've got enough insecurity and chaos with Donald Trump right now? I think that Quebecers will see through this. And again, since the vast majority of Quebecers want nothing to do with it, the only question is who can beat the PQ.
All right. Tom, I want to move on to today. It is May Day today, International Workers' Day. It's going to be quite the day downtown because we know typically every year when this happens, there are protests and demonstrations. This is happening, by the way, on the same day that there'll be thousands of people coming into downtown Montreal to watch the Habs game.
Yep.
So we find out on the same day, of course, this happens. $16.60, the new minimum wage in Quebec. We also know from a couple of studies this week, that's barely enough to get by. That doesn't even get you to the poverty line if you're a single person in this province. What do governments have to do? And I brought this up earlier. I said, is it time, because we've discussed this idea before, do we look at this because the gap between the richest and poorest is getting wider and wider every year? Is it time to bring back a guaranteed minimum wage or a guaranteed annual wage?
We've never had either of those, and so we can't really bring it back, but it's something that's talked about a great deal. But right now what we've got instead is a piecemeal approach where the government will give this check to the family of that size earning under this amount. And that's called picking winners, because you could have two houses side by side, one where both parents together earn just under the requisite amount and they're getting big checks from the government, and the other one working just as hard, earning a little bit more than the artificial line drawn in, by the government, and they don't get anything in return. And the other family winds up making more than them. It's what happens when governments decide that they're going to replace the market, they're going to replace employers, they're going to decide what people should be getting, and and by the way, I was there for some of these discussions when I was a minister. I can tell you right now, this is all about the government showing its usefulness, getting checks into people's hands with the stamp of the government of Quebec on it. And if you were to ever take the time to start looking at this stuff and saying, okay, maybe we could create more jobs. Maybe we could, have more work for people. Maybe the wages will go up, and that would be a good thing, instead of trying to have bureaucrats hand out checks in this condition or that condition or the other condition. That's what I call picking winners, and that means that they're creating losers at the same time. One other thing that they could do, Aaron, is bring back proper rent control in the province of Quebec. We've had these so-called reno-evictions where people are taking buildings, throwing people out of their apartments. They can't find anything decent at anywhere near the rent that they had been paying. That rent control system in Quebec was a good one. It's been in place since the 1950s. It was slowly dismantled by François Legault and the CAQ. Remember, these are mostly people who are well-to-do, really don't care too much about people who are paying rent. And maybe that'll change under Christine Frechette, and maybe that gives her an argument during the campaign. But for now, that is one of the things that they should definitely try to bring back.
We leave it at that, Tom. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too, Aaron.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.